the last but certainly not least, we have Robert Dempster. He was the sales engineer for First American Docutech, and he will be talking to us about accelerate closing, accelerate the dream. So with that, we'll get started with Robert.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robert Dempster. I am sales engineer for First American Docutech. For those of you that may not be familiar with First American Docutech, we are a document generation company, meaning we generate documents, we maintain compliance of them, we make sure they're generating when they're supposed to be generating, and we will deliver that outbound to anyone that needs to interact with the documents throughout the loan's lifecycle. Today, specifically, we're going to be focusing on an aspect of our full end-to-end offering, which is a version of e-closing called RON. RON, for those that may be unaware, is remote online notarization, and it essentially means that the entirety of the closing package will be signed electronically and virtually. So your signer never has to meet anyone face-to-face. They connect to an online session where they finish the transaction there. The version of RON that we were going to be taking a look at today utilizes a platform called Notaries to help facilitate the transaction, but ultimately you would be integrating with us and we would take care of the document generation all the way through the return after the RON session is complete. We will get to see all the moving pieces today, but because we only have 12 minutes together, it's going to be quite synopsized. It'll be a quick version. If you do want to see a more personalized demo, please feel free to reach out to us at Docutech.com. You can request a demo up at the top right or in the bottom center of the screen, and that'll get you in the right hands. We'll make sure we get a more personalized, more in-depth demo than what you will see here. Now, document generation for a RON will happen out of your LOS, and once generated, we first generate the package and send it outbound to your settlement agent on the transaction. The settlement agent is going to get an email directly from Notarized letting them know that there's documents ready for their review and that they can get in and start interacting with the documents therein. When they click to add their title documents, it'll bring them into Notarized itself, where in Notarized, it will first ask them for an email address for an account that they've set up with Notarized specifically. If they have yet to set up an account, they will sign up and create that account during this process. It's a very quick, easy setup, mainly just of their email and the password that they want to associate with the account. And once in at the transaction level, we basically give them a summary of all of the detail on this transaction, and we have them fill out a few different pieces of information or confirm pieces of information that we've already imported from the LOS. These will be aspects like when the actual closing is expected to take place, at what date and time, who's going to be the notary on the transaction, do they want to assign it from Notarized directly, or do they want to assign their own notary from a list of applicable notaries on their end? Are there any documents that they may want to interact with, modify, or add particular documents from their end? The settlement agent has aspects of all of this, so they can modify to their heart's content, and once they're ready to go, they can simply hit send transaction here and send it outbound. When they do send the transaction outbound, their portion of this particular transaction is done. They will immediately have links sent to both the signers on the transaction and to the notary that's assigned. Both parties, the signer and the notary, will be able to get in and start interacting with documents right away. Let's take a look at the borrower experience first. So the borrower will have received an email notification, again, right after they've hit release. The documents themselves will come via a link and an email that looks like this. The email will give basic instructions to that signer on how it's going to work, what they're going to do and in what order, and a kind of small checklist of items that they may need during the signing session. If they miss this in the initial email, that's no problem. The platform is very communicative, and in each section within Notarize, it will specify exactly what they need to do and what they're going to need in order to complete those particular actions. So just like the settlement agent, they will have to create an account if they do not already have an account with Notarize. And once they have logged in with that account they've either set up or utilized from previous sessions, they'll be brought to a screen that looks like this, where they can start their session or they can get another view into how it's going to work, essentially walking them through the steps in which they're going to be taking to complete this transaction. When they do hit sign now, we bring them into the first step, which is to walk them through the documents that they can sign without being in the presence of the notary. The very first piece of that is going to be for them to accept electronic consent. To do so, they can either click down here at the bottom, or they can click the button up here at the right-hand side of the screen to sign now. It's going to ask them to accept that consent and create their signatures. And once they've done so, it'll go ahead and apply that signature. We do have to ask for consent here because obviously as part of the RON session, we will record the entirety of the session, which they're agreeing to in this verbiage. From there, they can review the entirety of their closing package, reviewing each document page by page before moving on to the next document in the list. We're mimicking here as if they were reading documents on a table in front of them. And when they do get to a document that requires a signature, of course, they can apply their signature here and then move on to the next. If they want to see a list of total documents and when it's going to be executed, they can by hitting the document list here. It'll show all the documents in their closing package, which they can sign now, which will be signed in the notary meeting. And of course, as they continue forward, they will finish reviewing each document by document and signing subsequently in order as they go through. Now, when they get to the last document in the list, we will replace that button with a join meeting button. So now I'm on document 27 of 27. I can go ahead and hit join meeting, which will bring me to a screen where the borrower is going to set up their device to connect to the meeting itself. When I hit continue, it will automatically start my camera and my microphone to make sure both are working. Hello, everyone. As it starts the camera and the microphone, it will also run through a test of the connection. Now, for most signers in the transaction, it will at this time generally prompt them in whatever internet browser they're using to ask them to enable the camera and the microphone. Chrome, for example, which I'm using here, would normally have prompted me that up at the top left of my screen, but since I've connected to sessions in the past, it remembers that I'm okay with it and lets it go ahead and connect. Once everything is good to go, and yes, it does say my connection is weak, it is because I'm recording this as well. It'll let them go ahead and move onward to the next stage where it's gonna, again, warn me that I have a weak connection. And the next stage is validating the signer's authenticity. So we give them the information we've already imported from your LOS. We ask them to confirm the last four of their social. Once they've confirmed everything here is good, we bring them to KBAs where we are going to ask them 5 random questions from a credit reporting agency that get very specific to make sure that we validate their identity. They'll have 2 minutes to complete this. They can see the timer down here at the bottom, and then it's just a matter of them answering those questions correctly. In production, obviously, it doesn't point out the correct answers like it is in my test environment. And once they do answer all of those questions successfully, we let them know that they're good to go, and we move on to grabbing their ID. They can either get their ID from the mobile device that they may have in the app on the mobile phone, or they can take it directly with their camera on their computer, like I will here. When they continue to the next stage, we ask them what type of ID they're going to scan in, and then it's just a matter of taking the photo itself, which I can go ahead and do with my camera. And once I take a picture of both the front and the back of my ID, then it'll go ahead and move onwards to the very last step for the borrower, which is to wait for the notary to be ready. The ID verification will also ask them to confirm that we have the correct information on file for their ID. Oftentimes we'll have to ask for the driver's license because that won't be stored in the LOS. And once they continue, now we're going to let them know we're putting them in the notary's queue. Now, from the notary's perspective, they will be logged in a separate session and ready to go at the date and time that it's scheduled. The notary's view looks like this. It gives them kind of a detailed dashboard into sessions that they may have applicable. Down here under the Start Lender session, we'll see Joshua pop in, and we'll actually get to hear an audible chime when Joshua's ready, so that if I'm tabbed on another tab in Chrome, I'll still know that Joshua's ready to go and I can tab over and help him get started. So I'm going to go ahead and get started as Joshua. It'll put me in that queue and it'll start ringing for the notary here. On the notary's end, I see Joshua down here in the lender session section as promised. And when I click, it'll bring me into the session with Joshua directly. I'm going to go ahead and mute so we don't get a gnarly echo there. But you can see this is the borrower's viewpoint. It'll show them the documents and it'll move us through as the notary moves through the transaction. And on the notary's end, the notary has much the same view. They just have more control. So not only are they controlling what document we're viewing, so if I move document to document here, it'll move it on the borrower's screen as well. In addition, they have the ability to tag and modify fields on the documents themselves as needed. Now, the very first thing, of course, would be the notary introducing themselves. And then thereafter, the notary is going to check the ID of Joshua. That's why I see a little orange exclamation point right there. To do that, I hit the little ellipses and I hit check ID. It will open Joshua's ID that he has scanned in. I can view the front and the back, and I'm checking to make sure that the ID looks like the person that's actually connected in the session. If I need him to retake, I can prompt that either on his mobile phone or with the device that we're using now and explain why I need him to retake. And if everything's good to go, I complete that ID validation and I can exit out of that validation section. I can see that check mark now checks to green. Now from here, of course, we can go document by document if the borrower has any questions. The notary has a nice little feature up here to jump directly to the documents that still need applicable signatures, the notarizable documents here. And as they scroll down to the document itself, you can see all the fields that are needed both from the notary and from the borrower. On the borrower's end, of course, they're going to have kept pace with us, so they're on the deed of trust as well. They can scroll down and apply their signatures here manually on the document, or they can hit the Sign Now button. It's going to reuse the same signatures they had from earlier when they had connected to pre-sign the documents. And then, of course, you see the signatures go in automatically. On the notary's end, there's quite a few more fields for them to fill out. They can hit apply and will automatically apply many of the fields for them, namely today's dates and where they are. There are still fields that they will have to manually put in. Basically, the city that they're in, any additional information that they may have to input, and they will also have to input a disclaimer on how this was electronically signed, disclosure rather, which is just a prompt. They click over here on the right-hand side of the screen, and then they go ahead and they pull it in on the device itself. Once they've put in all the relevant information, of course, they can jump to the next document in question. Again, it's going to jump forward on the borrower's screen as I continue doing this, and we're doing that all the way through to the end of the transaction. Once complete, it's going to ask how the session was with the notary. Of course, the borrower can go ahead and give some direct feedback. And that's the end of the RON session. We'll automatically import it back into your LOS afterwards, and everything will be good to go. Now, of course, this was a light speed version here. If you do have any additional questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us and request a demo on our website, docutech.com. And I hope to hear from all of you soon. Have a good day.